You're watching a special edition of Southwest Florida in Focus. Today, an in-depth look at the controversies surrounding the Everglades Immigration Detention Center, dubbed Alligator Alcatraz. From concerns about the impact the center is having on the environment to reports of constitutional violations.
I mean, this is a bug-infested, really hot facility that is dangerous because it's in the middle of a storm, and that is grossly fiscally irresponsible and inhumane.
Hello, I'm Sandra Victorova. Thank you for joining us. It took only 8 days for the state of Florida to transform the Dade-Collier Training and Transition Airport into Alligator Alcatraz. That facility is currently holding approximately 1,000 detainees, but has the capacity to house close to 3,000 people. Less than a month into operations, the detention center has been the target of multiple lawsuits alleging damage to the critical ecosystem, inhumane conditions, and violations of constitutional rights. However, Governor Ron DeSantis recently called the detention center a professionally run facility and says it will help deliver on President Donald Trump's mission of mass deportation to
I do think it'll be beneficial if you're able to have an increased pace of removals. You're going to end up with less stress on schools, less stress on hospitals, less stress on the criminal justice system. So I don't understand why they think this is something that is going to be effective. There's so many things that Floridians care about. Why don't you fight for Florida citizens? Why are you fighting for foreign nationals that came into the country illegally?
State Representative Adam Botana of Bonita Springs recently visited the detention center. He said the facility was adequate and met the needs of detainees. He says the facility is needed and will help deal with illegal immigration.
These people are breaking the law. They are here illegally. You know, did I feel bad walking down the inmate, the line when they're bringing them in? Yeah, of course I did. But again, they're here illegally. If you're here illegally, you're not supposed to be here. It is unfortunate, and I think a lot of these people have been here 10, 15 years, and they've been, constantly looking over their shoulder, and it's a horrible way to live. But I think we have to do stuff at the federal level and the immigration to make it easier for these people to stay and to work the proper way. H-2Bs, H-2As, there's different work visas that I think the federal government needs to really approve on, to get these people out here to work. But if you're here illegally, they need to go back.
Some members of Congress have toured the Everglades Detention Facility. That includes our next guest, Congressman Maxwell Frost, who represents Florida's 10th Congressional District. Representative Frost, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
So you described this facility as an internment camp. What led you to that description?
Well, two things. Number one, the purpose of the facility. I mean, having something like this in the Everglades, keeping 32 grown men caged, where there's about 4 to 6 cages per tent, to me, looks more like an internment camp than any kind of detention facility. And people have to remember that detention facilities are meant to help people, number one, people who are not serving a sentence for a crime, but they are being detained as they go through a deportation process, which is a legal process. And the conditions in this facility are abhorrent. And so I think it's important that we're honest about what we're doing here. The other thing is it's really one ethnicity makeup that is in this internment camp, right? It's not, when we talk about undocumented people, it spans the spectrum of people from across the entire world who have entered the country, not through a port of entry, people who've overstayed visas. There's many different ways people become undocumented in this country that are from all around the world. I go into this facility, all I do is see Latinos and I think a few Haitian folks.
Your colleagues on the other side of the aisle, Republican lawmakers have been speaking with the media and have said that essentially described conditions, quite honestly, completely opposite from what you're describing, saying that it was clean, food was good, that conditions seemed perfectly fine. Why are these descriptions so different?
Well, number one, they are there to sell what the governor wants them to sell, right? When I was on that tour, the Republicans that were on that tour were laughing the whole time, telling jokes the whole time, not really taking it seriously. And so we were there with a notepad and pen. None of them had notepads and pens writing stuff down. That's why when you listen to them talk about it, they offer no specifics. They came out and they said, well, it's clean, they're eating good, it's fine. And that's about all that we get out of them. I have specifics on my concerns. And so I'm not here to say it's not a well-run facility. It's a well-run internment camp. The Florida Division of Emergency Management is really good at setting up an operation, and they should be focused on hurricane preparedness and not spending $450 million of the $500 million of discretionary funds that they have to help us during hurricanes before they have to go back to the legislature. They should focus on that and not running this internment camp. So yeah, I mean, something that you hear a lot from the Republicans that went is it's well run. It is well run. It's a well run internment camp. It's a well-run internment camp where people are being held in cages. I would say some of the stuff that's not well-run, though, are these reports we're hearing about the toilets being backed up and different things like that.
Congressman, you recently introduced a bill with Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz that would prohibit the operation and funding of the facility. You also know that there are lawsuits being presented by, several groups. Do you see a scenario where this facility is actually shut down?
I do. We're gonna have to see where the lawsuit goes. After I left the facility, I gave a speech on the House floor to write my experience into the congressional record, which then makes it usable in lawsuits and different things like that. Part of what the state is contending and why they had to skipped over the NEPA process is because they're saying it's not a federal facility. When I was in the facility, Kevin Guthrie, the guy who's running it, told me explicitly, and I have it written down in my notebook, quote for quote, that ICE is calling the shots, that ICE is telling them exactly what to do. It is a federal facility that the state is operating, and it's being run by private contractors. That is how that facility is being run, and this new information should change the landscape a bit of the lawsuit. I also got to say, I think the state knows that it's going to be shut down too. This is part of the reason they keep saying it's a temporary facility. They know it's not sustainable. It's costing taxpayers a fortune. A fortune it is costing taxpayers. And again, this is not being spoken about enough. But in Florida law, the Florida Division of Emergency Management can spend up to $500 million without getting things approved by the legislature. In a state of emergency, the reason why this was done is so when there's a hurricane, they can get moving because every second matters when we're talking about a hurricane to protecting our people and keeping people alive. They are spending that money and they're saying it's going to cost $450 million. It's going to cost more, which means if a hurricane bubbles up in the Gulf tomorrow and it is barreling towards the state, they will not have what they need to get moving, to keep our people safe, because they wanted to create an internment camp. And because you have to ask yourself, why didn't the governor use the Department of Corrections to create the whole thing? Because they don't have that power to be able to skirt through the process of getting contractors approved, to be able to skirt through the process of going to the legislature. It had to be the Florida Division of Emergency Management. And that should scare people. If you don't care about the conditions, which you should, if you don't care about the conditions, you should at a minimum understand that the resources, the capacity being used is directly impacting our ability to do what we need to do to keep people safe.
Congressman Frost, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
After the break, a look at the class action lawsuit claiming the detention center violates the Constitution. Attorneys speak out about what they call the lack of due process and struggles to communicate with their clients. President Trump said the detention facility would house, quote, some of the most vicious people on the planet. But a recent investigation by the Miami Herald and the Tampa Bay Times found that several hundred detainees had no criminal record. The American Civil Liberties Union has filed a class action lawsuit against the Trump administration and Florida officials on behalf of the hundreds of people who have been detained in the Everglades facility. That suit claims that constitutional rights are being ignored via a lack of access to legal counsel and violations of due process. That includes 35-year-old Michael Borrego. He is one of the people at the center of the ACLU lawsuit.
Home videos of Michael Borrego in South Florida show a doting father to his 2-year-old daughter, Athenia. Borrego left Cuba in 2019, legally entering the U.S. at the Mexican border. Borrego's mom, Yanesi Fernandez, says her son, just like her, was fleeing political persecution in Cuba. She finds it hard to believe he now lives in fear of the U.S. government. He was sent to Alligator Alcatraz just days after it opened.
That isn't a prison. That's a concentration camp. That's a center that is torturing him.
Fernandez believes his detention there has made him sick. We spoke to his lawyer, Mitch Gonzalez.
He woke up in a pool of his own blood, and he had no ability to call his lawyers to report what was going on whatsoever. His only option was to beg for help from officials who really do not see him as human. The detained men in his same cage made enough of a fuss. They took him in an ambulance to a hospital.
Borrego had hemorrhoid surgery and 2 days later was sent back to the facility where his wound became infected.
He was in excruciating pain. He suffered another emergency where he soiled himself, was again covered in blood, and was denied by officials a change of clothing. This is degrading and inhumane treatment.
Gonzalez says he's not just concerned about his client's safety.
People have reported not being allowed to shower for several days on end. People have reported finding worms in their food. People have reported flooding of the toilets, resulting in feces and urine all over the floor.
Gonzalez says Borrego should have never ended up here, that he had a strong case for residency after he was granted humanitarian parole. But Gonzalez says, like many immigrants, Borrego lacked adequate legal counsel. And when Gonzalez had a run-in with the law while employed for a pool company, that changed everything.
He was working for an employer that, unbeknownst to him, was running a major fraud scheme.
Gonzalez says Borrego was too afraid to risk time in jail, so he said yes to a plea agreement.
And this is something that is very common in the U.S. justice system. You know, people take plea agreements for things that they did not do or certainly did not intentionally do all the time in order to avoid the trauma of being separated by prolonged imprisonment from their families.
Borrego pleaded guilty to grand theft in 2024, a second-degree felony, and conspiracy to commit grand theft. But then Borrego was cited for driving with an expired license.
He immediately took steps to notify his probation officer. His probation officer reassured him he could come in and that they would resolve the matter without it escalating further. Instead, he was apprehended.
On Monday, more than 2 weeks after Borrego had arrived at the facility, his attorney had still not been able to have a confidential call with him.
The last time that someone from our legal team went to visit, they were frankly told and flatly told by an officer standing guard outside the gates that there would be no in-person legal visits at that facility. And that is truly, truly shocking to us. That is not something I've ever experienced in any type of carceral facility, be it an immigrant detention center, a county jail, a federal or state prison.
Fernandez is desperate for information. She says calls from him are sporadic.
I can't find anything out about my son. I don't know if he's in the hospital. I can't see him. I can't do anything for him.
She finds it almost incomprehensible that she now thinks her son might actually be safer in Cuba.
And an update on this story. On Wednesday, Gonzalez was able to have his first confidential video call with Borrego. It took 16 days to make that happen. Gonzalez says he is still trying to reach an ICE officer assigned to this case. To learn more about the legal issues surrounding the Everglades Detention Center, we're joined by longtime immigration attorney Ira Kurzban. Mr. Kurzban, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
So, as you know, the class action lawsuit that was filed against Governor DeSantis as well as state lawmakers essentially alleges that detainees are unable to access their lawyers, that detainees are being denied confidential attorney-client communication. We've heard one attorney describe this as essentially a black hole, that they can't get information on how to contact their clients or when to reach clients. So help us to understand by law, what type of legal access are these detainees required to receive?
Okay, under the Immigration and Nationality Act, there's no question but that it says that you are entitled to have a lawyer at your own expense, or if there's a free lawyer available, as there are in many of these cases, and that you have a right to representation in an immigration proceeding. It seems to me this is clearly an effort just to prevent people from getting access to their attorneys. Part of it is due to the fact that this is just a makeshift, I would even call it a prison, because prisons have rules, they have guidance, they have people who are competent running the facility. We don't have any of the normal, usual procedural safeguards that people have. In fact, as we know, 60% of these people are just people scooped up off the street, many of whom have been here for years in the United States, have no criminal record, have no other problems except they've been working hard for the last 10, 15, 20 years, whoever they are. And those people have equities, and those equities allow them to have a hearing. And at that hearing, if the judge believes that they're eligible for certain kinds of benefits, for example, we have something called cancellation of removal. If you've been here more than 10 years and you have American citizen children who would suffer extraordinary and extremely unusual hardship, you're entitled to remain here. And that's aside from other forms of relief, including the simplest of all, which is I want to voluntarily leave the United States and I don't want to have a record of deportation. So a lawyer has a critical role, whether it's asylum, cancellation, or others. And sometimes it's even on the merits that I shouldn't be deported at all. That's why you need a lawyer. And the fact is that the rates of approvals vary extraordinarily by whether or not you have counsel.
Do you see any remedy here? I mean, if these attorneys can't reach their clients and they're quickly deported, I mean, what is next?
A lawsuit has been brought. The lawsuit is designed to get access by lawyers to their clients or potential clients. And I believe any judge is going to say, in all fairness, that a person has the right to have counsel. It's right in the act. And if it wasn't in the act, it would be a part of our Constitution. It's what's called due process. What we want to do in these lawsuits is basically say, these people have a right to counsel. You can't have a right to counsel if you don't set up a system that allows them to do that, which means you're supposed to be able to call or send an email or do something that says, I want to visit my client and I want to see them. In most places, you don't even have to do that. You can show up if you're the lawyer for the person and say, I want to see my client. And I want to see him in a confidential basis. In other words, there's supposed to be a room available where you can talk to your client in confidence.
Mr. Kurzban, you told me earlier that you feel the DeSantis administration is violating the constitutional rights of these detainees. What precedent does this set, having these folks at Alligator Alcatraz?
There is no precedent for anything like this. It is clear that if you are deciding to incarcerate people, again, this is where they fall back. Well, this is civil. This is not criminal. So we don't have to do some of the things we do for criminals. We can treat people who are civilly detained even worse. That sometimes they make that argument. It's not constitutional to just lock people away in horrific conditions and then say, well, we're doing it because they're the worst of the worst, when that's not even true. So they're not really detention centers, which is kind of a euphemism. They're horrible jail-like conditions that are even worse than normally run jails and prisons. And remember, they are not criminals. They're not serving a sentence. They're simply there awaiting a deportation hearing, which again is a civil proceeding. So imagine if you owed a debt to somebody, and what they did is they threw you into the middle of the Everglades until your trial was over about your debt. That's the equivalent of what immigration is. Immigration is a civil proceeding it's not a criminal proceeding, but they've criminalized it by putting people in these horrific conditions.
Ira Kurzban, we thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your insight.
Okay, thank you.
After the break, the Everglades is considered one of the most fragile ecosystems in North America, and environmental groups have concerns regarding the detention center's impact on endangered species. Florida's top emergency official is requesting a federal judge throw out a lawsuit from environmental groups that aims to shut down Alligator Alcatraz. Kevin Guthrie, the executive director for the Florida Division of Emergency Management, said in a court filing that the lawsuit was filed in the wrong jurisdiction, since all detention facilities, buildings, and pavings at issue are located in Collier County, not Miami-Dade. The lawsuit, filed on behalf of the Center for Biological Diversity and Friends of the Everglades, claims the facility poses a cruel and inhumane threat to the ecologically sensitive wetlands. WGCU's Jennifer Crawford reports those environmental groups dispute previous statements from the governor, who maintains the facility has no impact on the Everglades.
Environmentalists warn that each day Alligator Alcatraz remains up and running is one more day of irreparable damage to the Everglades, North America's only subtropical wilderness, and home to thousands of native species of plants and animals, dozens of which are endangered or threatened.
Well, we know that species like the Florida panther are just barely clinging to existence. We have one population, the only in the world, that's found here in South Florida. There's roughly 200 of them left in the wild.
Florida director and attorney at the Center for Biological Diversity, Elise Bennett, says the significant increase in traffic can doom the Florida panther.
Dump trucks, staff coming to work on the site, transporting folks to be held at the site, and all of that increases the chances of losing more panthers to road deaths, which just drives them closer to the brink of extinction.
Bennett says the facility also threatens one of the rarest bats in the world, the Florida bonneted bat.
We've talked with bat experts, and we know that they have been documented just miles from the site. And they can fly dozens of miles every night. So we know it's very likely that they're flying over this area, that they're foraging.
She says the detention center lights up the night sky, reportedly seen at least 15 miles away.
As you bring all of the artificial lights into the site, what you're doing is you're destroying their grocery store, their restaurant, the places that they go to eat. And that puts them at greater risk and makes them weaker, and displaces them. This is an area that's actually known as an international dark sky. It's one of the darkest skies east of the Mississippi River. And preserving that darkness is not only good for us, people who like to go and stargaze, but also for wildlife like panthers that do a lot of their movement and hunting at night, and Florida bonneted bats who need dark open skies to hunt as well.
She says they're concerned about chemicals used at the site harming wildlife, like the Everglades snail kite, a bird who hunts snails.
If you're using pesticides and they're getting into the prey items for these endangered species, that it could impact them at a cascading scale, right? Maybe not directly, but through the food that they're eating.
Bennett also says noise, water, and soil pollution are top concerns.
This is an incredibly ecologically sensitive area. If you just look out, really to either side, you see water and wetlands that are surrounding the site all the way up to where that paved runway is. It's very vulnerable to runoff. And so we know that we've seen new paving, new asphalt. All of that risks introducing new contaminants from the paving itself. But also the contaminants of just keeping thousands of people living on this site, all of the solid waste, the trash, the human refuse.
Governor DeSantis has denied the detention center will cause environmental harm.
Any sense that somehow this is going to have any impact at all on the overall Everglades there's zero impact.
From the large and charismatic Florida panther all the way to a lowly crabgrass, the impacts are extensive, and when you destroy the fabric of life by coming into an incredibly sensitive place like this and develop, you're not only hurting each and every one of those species, but you're also hurting humanity.
In the Everglades, I'm Jennifer Crawford reporting for WGCU News.
Coming up next week, recreating the power of hurricanes, how a new facility coming to South Florida will help build stronger, more resilient communities. We thank you for joining us for this special edition of Southwest Florida in Focus. And don't forget to like and subscribe to our WGCU News YouTube channel, where you can find all of our stories and those extended interviews. We hope you have a great day, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for watching. We've got more great content for you, from news to the arts to the environment. So be sure to like and subscribe to WGCU's YouTube channel and follow us on our social media platforms for the stories that matter to you.